This is the one thing I had really wanted to do in person with you in the classroom. I think, nevertheless, I can give you the basics. A coin has two sides, so does a market. Demand is a buying side and supply is a selling side. When we're talking about demand, we are talking about the buyer or the consumer. When we're talking about supply, we are talking about the supplier or the producer of a product. Right now, we're talking about demand theory, which is right here. Now, demand is the desire, the willingness, and the ability to buy a good or service. For demand to exist, a consumer must want a good or service, be willing to pay for that good or service, and have the resources available to buy that good or service. A demand curve is a graph that shows the amount of a product that would be bought at all possible prices in the market. Prices on the vertical axis up and down, quantities on the horizontal axis this way. Note the difference between an individual demand and a market demand. In a moment, I'm going to show you an individual demand schedule. There's also something called a market demand schedule. Individual demand shows what a consumer is willing to pay for a specific product. Market demand shows the demand for the entire market, as in the demand for eggs, oranges, or gasoline. It's important to know that the demand for a product before setting up a shop in a city or town to sell that particular product. You need to investigate and you need to research the demand for that product before you start selling that product in a particular area. Now, this is very important. This is a law of demand. Quantity demanded and price are always going to move in opposite directions. Therefore, demand is an inverse relationship. Now, once you do the math, by the way, you would think the final answer is supposed to be negative, therefore, since it is an inverse relationship. However, economists in general leave off the negative symbol simply because we are not interested in negative or positive. We are interested in absolute values. The demand curve will always slope downward. People are normally willing to buy less of a product if the price is high and more of a product if the price is low. Another way of saying that is when the price is high, people are not going to buy it. When the price is low, people are going to buy that product, more of that product. If you try to draw the demand curve sloping upward, it simply will not make sense because people are not going to be willing to buy more of a product when the price goes up. They're going to want to buy less of that product when the price goes up. So what I've done here, I have put a individual buyer demand schedule. And it doesn't really matter what product we're talking about. It could be any product. Let's just assume that we're talking about video games. Now, this is, again, the individual buyer demand schedule. If this were a market schedule, that means that these numbers probably would not change, except instead of this representing one particular product and one product and two products, three products and five products, we're talking about 1 million products, 2 million products, 3 million products, and 5 million products. That would represent a market schedule. Let's go ahead and plot this particular individual buyer's demand schedule on this graph right here. All right, so at $50, since that is such a high price, the consumer is willing to buy none of these products, zero of the products. Here's the zero right here. See this? Let's go all the way up. Let's put a mark right there. Now, at $40, the price is a little bit lower, so the consumer might be willing to buy one product right here. At $30, the price is still low. The consumer is going to be willing to buy one product. At $20, you can see the price is going down lower, so the consumer is going to be willing to buy two products. At $10, which is a much lower price, the consumer is going to be willing to buy three products because the price is lower. Now, at $5, which is a very, very low price, it's right in here, the consumer is going to be willing and able to buy a lot of products, 5 products, because the price is so low. Let's go ahead and join them. That becomes your demand curve. Now, notice that the curve is sloping downward. It's always going to slope downward because the law of demand is an inverse relationship. These are factors that will affect the demand curve. They will affect which way the demand curve moves, either left or right. Now, these factors are important because when we start talking about supply, you're also going to have factors that will affect the supply curve. The supply curve is a positive relationship. So therefore, the supply curve goes up. It starts at the bottom left and it goes to the top right. Let's talk about a few of these. More consumers enter the market when incomes of consumers change in the market. When incomes of consumers change in the market, if the incomes go up, the demand curve will move to the right because people have more money to spend. If the incomes go down, then you'll see that the demand curve is going to shift to the left, not just at one location, but at every possible price, which means the entire curve moves to the left. When consumer taste in the market change, I like to use this example right here of the advertising. If you notice when you go to Walmart, if you go to the cosmetics section, you'll notice that all of the cosmetics are now lit up with these little neon lights, little white lights. Same thing with the candy racks at Food Line. When you go to the Food Line, you'll notice that the candy's all lit up. That is a form of advertising, and it's making the products more desirable. It's making the products more noticeable. As a consequence, think about it. Which way is the demand curve going to move, left or right? The answer is to the right, because more people are going to be willing and able to buy that product at any given price, simply because the product is more visible and therefore it's more desirable. As you're looking at this, be aware that as that demand curve moves left or right, you're also going to have factors that will affect supply. Sometimes the supply curve will move left or right. Sometimes the supply curve will move at the same time that the demand curve moves. When that happens, we need to pay special attention to the equilibrium point, which is a point in the center where the supply and demand curve meet. Is equilibrium moving left or right, or is it moving up or down, or both? So that's very important. It's going to be important when we start looking at supply. By the way, the supply notes are parallel in structure to the demand notes right here. We'll talk about supply, we'll talk about the law of supply, we'll talk about changes in supply, factors affecting supply, and then we're going to talk about elasticity of supply as well. Let's look at elasticity of demand. Remember that elasticity of demand is simply the extent to which a change in price causes a change in quantity demanded. In other words, if the price drops by 25%, is that going to cause a change in quantity demanded, either up or down, by 25%? Now, the answer is not necessarily. Sometimes it will, but it's very rare that that happens. If that does happen, if the change in quantity demanded is exactly the same percent as the change in the percent change in price, then that is called unitary elasticity. When you do the math using the formula that I have linked not far from here, the final number is going to be 1. If it's unitary, then it's 1. Now think about why this is. Why it's going to be 1. Okay, again, this is our individual buyer demand schedule, and this is our graph right here. The line is going to look this way if it's unitary. It basically means that the change in price over here, the percent change, is going to be exactly the same as the percent change in quantity demanded. When you do the math, look at the formula that I've linked in this section right here. When you do the math, the answer is going to be 1. Now let's examine why. So let's say that the change in price is 20% here, and that's leading to a 20% change in quantity demanded. What's 20 divided by 20? The answer is 1. Let's assume that the change in price is 40 over here, which leads to a 40% change in quantity demanded. What's 40 divided by 40? The answer is 1. Let's assume over here that the change in price is 10%, which is leading to a 10% change in quantity demanded. 10 divided by 10 is 1. Okay, an example of an elastic demand would be, well, a good example is beans. If you go to the supermarket and there's 20 different types of beans, like pinto beans, the price of the one that you've been buying suddenly goes up even just a little bit, then there's going to be probably a very large change in demand, which means that the product is elastic because there are a lot of substitutes for that particular product. It's very, very easy for a consumer to simply reach over and grab another brand of beans because there's so many different kinds of brands of beans. So that would be considered elastic. All right. Another example would be bread, chocolate bars, candy. If the price goes up, you're going to reach over and grab another type of candy. It's very, very elastic. Okay. Even a small change in price is going to lead to a very large change in the quantity demanded. That is elasticity right there. That is elastic demand. Now, perfectly elastic means that even if there's no change in the price, then you're going to see a very large change in demand. Now, that is something that is rare, but if you do see something that's perfectly elastic, then you're going to see a perfectly horizontal line. I always like to tell my students, notice that the center of the E is a horizontal line, which is basically a perfectly elastic demand line. Perfectly inelastic demand is a vertical line up and down. Notice that the letter I is a vertical line, which means that the product does not have a lot of substitutes, and even a very large change in price is going to lead to probably no change or very little change in quantity demanded. A very good example is salt. Uh, if you want salt, you want salt. There's no substitute for that. Water, you have to have water. If the price of water suddenly goes up, then you're probably not going to see a very big change in demand. Cigarettes are sometimes considered to be inelastic. Another example would be heart medicine. If the price goes up, you have to have it. So you're not going to see a very big change in quantity demanded, regardless of how high the price goes up. Okay, another example of inelastic demand. Let's go back up here. Another example of inelastic demand would be luxury products such as diamonds or emeralds or perhaps a luxury automobile. If you're in the market for a Lamborghini, then you're not going to settle for anything else. There are no substitutes for a Lamborghini. If you want a Lamborghini, then you're going to get a Lamborghini, regardless of the price. Even if the price goes way up, you're probably not going to see a very large change in demand for that product. Same thing with diamonds. If you're in the market for a diamond, then you're not going to settle for anything else. Usually those who are in the market for Lamborghinis and diamonds can afford it. And even if there's a large change in price, you're not going to see a large change in quantity demanded because there are very little substitutes. There are very few substitutes for Lamborghini and diamond. Okay, this is our chart. Remember that this is price over here. And this is quantity over here. Quantity demanded. Okay, now, if you have a product that is elastic in demand, you're usually going to see a line that goes like that. It's going to be kind of horizontal. Now, of course, a perfectly elastic product would be horizontal, completely horizontal. A elastic demand product means that very little change in the price over here is going to lead to a very large change in price over here. And again, the best example I could think of would be beans. If you see a very small change in the price over here, that's usually going to lead to a very large change in the quantity demanded simply because there's a lot of substitutes for beans. You can reach over and just grab another brand of beans. Bread's the same way, candy, same way. On the other hand, if the product is inelastic, you're going to see a line that goes like this, which means that even a very large change in price here is going to lead to usually a very small change in quantity demanded. The main reason is because there are no substitutes for that product. A good example would be gasoline. Now, gasoline is kind of different because gasoline could be elastic if we're talking about gasoline from at one local station, gasoline station versus another. If the price of Shell station gasoline goes up, then it's so easy just to go across the street to Exxon station and switch, and most consumers will do that. If you're looking at a individual demand schedule, then probably gasoline is going to be elastic. However, if you are looking at the overall market schedule of gasoline as a whole, then that is going to be inelastic because right now there's no substitute for gasoline. So even a large change at the market level in price of gasoline is going to lead to either a little change or possibly even no change in the quantity demanded. Now remember, if there's no change in quantity demanded, then that's going to be a perfectly vertical line right there. Okay, that's called perfectly inelastic. Another example would be salt is sometimes considered inelastic. Even a large change in price is going to lead to very little change in quantity demanded. Heart medicine is considered inelastic. Even a large change in price is going to lead to very little, probably no change, and that might be actually perfectly inelastic. It's going to lead to probably no change in quantity demanded because people have to have heart medicine, diabetes medicine, insulin is inelastic. Even a large change in price is going to lead to either a small change or no change in quantity demanded. Again, the way I remember this is when you draw the E like this, see, look at that line right there. See, that is perfectly horizontal, which means that this is elastic right here. And on the other hand, if you draw an I for inelastic right here, you look at this line in the center here, and this line right here in the center is vertical, which means that perfectly vertical is inelastic, and it's called perfectly inelastic. And this is our mathematical formula. Now pay close attention to this. Make sure that you know this very well because it is very, very important. Okay, so if you have a small change right here in price that's leading to a large change or a larger change in quantity demanded, then the number that you're going to come up with is above 100% divided by 25%. Now, on the other hand, if you have a large change in price, which is leading to a small change in quantity demanded, this of course would be inelastic. Then you have here a small number, which is divided by a larger number, which is going to lead you to a point value. Okay, again, here you have a large number here, which is divided by a smaller number, which is leading you to a number above above 1. Okay, here it's going to be below 1. And don't forget, if it's directly in the center here, that means that the quantity, the change in percent change in price is the exact same as the percent change in quantity demanded. That's called unitary. When you do the math here, you're going to come up with 1 every single time. Same thing with supply as well. Okay.